All right, I'm going to be making up some pesto. Estrella has picked a beautiful bunch of lettuce leaf basil from the greenhouse, and they're huge. They're really wonderful, but if you could just smell these, you'd just be amazed at how wonderful it is. They're just big, beautiful leaves. They're massive. They really have just as much flavor as the small leafed basil, and consequently, if you're growing the lettuce leaf, you get a lot more return, really a lot quicker. Anyway, so what we have is we have a nice big tub of basil. I have macadamia nuts today instead of pine nuts. When you're making basil pesto, you can use a lot of different kinds of nuts. You know, pine nuts are traditional, macadamia nuts are great, pistachios are good, you can even use walnuts if you want. So we have basil, macadamia nuts, some garlic, some Asiago cheese, and salt. This is just regular coarse Morton's kosher salt. And then olive oil. I have a couple different olive oils here because I've got one bottle, but I'm going to be using up the rest of it. It's just got about an inch left in it. And then I've got California extra virgin olive oil from Kirkland's. It's Costco. Anyway, you can use Parmesan if you want. I've got Asiago right now, so that's what I'm going to be using instead of Parmesan. So anyway, I'm going to put a couple pieces of garlic in the food processor. And then I'm going to add some nuts and the salt. And I'm going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And this is really pretty much by eye and taste. There's not any real hard and fast rules on how much of anything that you're going to use, because when you're making up pesto, you're usually, if you've got a garden and you've got a lot of basil, you're going to just be putting the basil in there and processing it up until you have enough. It looks the way you want it to look. Now I'm going to start adding the basil. Put this process down. Yep. Add this to it. We usually make up a lot of pesto during the summer and then freeze it in 4 and 8 ounce jars. As long as you keep a little layer of olive oil across the top of the jar, and that goes for if you're just keeping it in the refrigerator too, it'll keep for a long time. But your basil pesto that you put in the freezer will keep easily for a year, as long as it just has a nice little coating of olive oil over the top of it. Now I'm going to add a handful of cheese, some more olive oil, If I'm just processing basil to just save to add to different dishes, I will wash it and run it through the salad spinner and then just process it with olive oil and a little bit of salt. so that you can just freeze that for the winter time. And that's a really nice thing to have on hand, just to add to different dishes or soups or whatever, or even to add your different ingredients to make it into pesto. You know, if you have a glut of basil, you sometimes really need to do something just to get it taken care of. So I'm combining the two batches together now. I'm going to taste it and see if it needs more seasoning. It does, it needs more salt. So there's probably about 2 teaspoons of salt altogether in this at this point. If you were using Parmesan cheese, you wouldn't probably put quite as much salt in, but as I said, it's all to taste, so you just need to figure out the way you like it to taste and go from there. You could put more garlic in it, you could add more olive oil, more cheese, or less, whatever you want. Pesto should be basically up to the person who's making it and what their flavor is that they like. A little more salt. Okay, so there's about 3 teaspoons of salt in there now. I will do one little jar up to show you how to float the olive oil on top of the surface. So I have a clean 4-ounce canning jar here. When you're tasting food, you should always use a separate clean spoon each time you taste. You know, you dip into your food that you're making to make sure that you don't have saliva, because if you double dip and you put a spoon that's been in your mouth into your food, it's going to start basically digesting the product that you've made, because it's a situation where your saliva, if it comes in contact with the food, will basically start breaking your food down. So you always want to use a clean spoon each time you taste. Normally in a commercial kitchen you'll see that they have a canister full of what they call taster spoons, and you're always supposed to use a clean spoon each time you taste it. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this correctly or not, but it just has a layer of olive oil right floating across the top of the pesto. And by doing that, you'll make sure that your pesto doesn't oxidize and it won't change color. It'll stay a nice green color. If you're freezing this right away, you're going to want to make sure that there's a little bit of airspace on top of the jar, you know, like an eighth or a quarter of an inch or so. All right, that's basil pesto for you, made with macadamia nuts. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.